Let's take a little journey to the book of 2 Kings, chapter 14. In the 15th year of King Amaziah, son of Joash of Judah, King Jeroboam, son of Joash of Israel, became king in Samaria for 41 years. He did what was displeasing to the Lord. He did not depart from all the sins that Jeroboam, son of Nebat, had caused Israel to commit. Okay, in English, by this point, the people of God had been split into two kingdoms: the southern kingdom of Judah, with its capital of Jerusalem, and the northern kingdom of Israel, with its capital of Samaria. Jeroboam became king of the northern kingdom, and he was a bad guy. He did what was evil in the sight of the Lord. But the text goes on to tell us something good that he did for Israel. It was he who restored the territory of Israel from Lebo-Hamath to the Sea of the Arabah. So the northern kingdom had lost some of the promised land, and Jeroboam got it back. But there's more. In accordance with the promises that the Lord, the God of Israel, had made through his servant, the prophet Jonah, son of Amittai from Gath-Hepher. How many prophets named Jonah, son of Amittai, could there possibly have been? We are almost certainly talking about the same Jonah here. If so, this helps us date the prophet Jonah because the book of Jonah gives us no historical references whatsoever to do so. Jeroboam ruled in the mid-900s BC. He apparently received word from God that territory had been lost, would be restored. And it was. Even though Jonah was working with a wicked king, he was still receiving revelations from God. Jonah, in the northern kingdom of Israel, would have seen this as a tremendously good thing. The politics were wacky, but God was still working on behalf of his people, which might explain Jonah's hesitation when he gets another revelation about going to Nineveh. For in Jonah's mind, and for that matter, anyone's mind back then, God destroying Nineveh would be an exceedingly good thing. Nineveh was one of the major cities of the Assyrian Empire. They were an up-and-coming powerhouse in the ancient Near East. And because the Hebrew language of the text seems to not be 10th century BC Hebrew, but a much later form of Hebrew, when the book of Jonah was written, the writer and readers would know what everyone knew back then, that Assyria would, in 722 BC, destroy the northern kingdom of Israel once and for all. Someone reading Jonah chapters 1 through 3 in those days after the fall of Israel would have all been on Team Jonah for the first 3 chapters. They would have all agreed that helping Nineveh would be the last thing that anyone should do. They were the enemy that defeated them. But then they get to the 4th chapter, and they would all be surprised because they would find a message that would challenge not only their way of seeing the world, but the way that humans have seen the world ever since. We are so quick to dehumanize our enemies. We are so quick to regard other human beings who are guilty only of the crime of being different than us with callous contempt. But God's mercy, compassion, and grace is bigger. There's an old quote that I repeat often that says, God made us in his own image, and then we returned the favor. We are guilty over and over again of shrinking God down to the size and scale that he looks just like us. He likes the people we like. He hates the people we hate. He has all the same opinions and perspectives that I do, obviously. But whenever we do that, whatever God we've crafted in our mind's eye is not God. That is one of the enduring messages of the scriptures, that God is always stretching the understanding of his people, widening our horizons, taking our cheap little versions of grace and forgiveness and love and blowing them up into real grace, real forgiveness, and real love. We don't sing about okay grace or fine grace or pretty nice grace. We sing amazing grace. It's amazing. What God did for Nineveh was amazing. What Jonah wanted to happen to Nineveh isn't amazing at all. That is why I think the book of Jonah wasn't about Nineveh. Nineveh was easy to turn to God. The sailors were easy to turn to God. The sea, a great fish, a plant, and a worm of unusual size were like putty in God's hands. But Jonah? By the end of the story, he's just standing there next to a dried stump of a dead plant throwing a temper tantrum, which I think is the ultimate point of this book. Because we can either get on the side of a grace that is truly amazing and the God who is willing to spread it around without abandon, or we can go and stand next to Jonah.